Hi everyone, this is Leonard Bartosek. This is the 5th episode of my book project, my reading project, Collective Utopia. If you're here for the first time, I might suggest going back to the very first episode where I describe and explain the whole project more in depth. In about 20 minutes I'm laying out a landscape of how this project evolved and what are the main columns of content and the entire structure and how you can participate in the project. So right now I jump directly into the next paragraph. October the 6th, 2021. Baroque light cones, the three basic pillars of the book: status quo, collective utopia, and the spiritual dimension. I awake in the morning and a wonderful calm pervades the room. It is that often described calm after the storm, when nature is freshly saturated and nourished, resting with itself with a special power and presence. The air in a harmonious balance of pleasant humidity and temperature nestles against my body in autumnal balance. It is these magical moments when Mother Nature seems to embrace man, granting body and mind a rest that strengthens and invigorates. It is such a window of an in-between season. The human body is so vulnerable in contrast to the animals, is constantly challenged in its existence by the seasons and must survive periods of freezing cold, and in this country especially sweltering heats. The seasons test and challenge man and his organism, nudge him out of his inertia. We have to protect ourselves and have developed all these cultural techniques to cope with the weather extremes. At that moment, the cultural man falls away from me. The need to protect oneself by clothing or building constructions falls away. I sit here like Adam in paradise, as God created me. Only a pair of shorts protects me from the gaze of others who do not meet me because I sit all alone on the hill. That is, even the social control that has become such a matter of course for us, I'm not subject to at this moment, a moment of freedom and quiet enjoyment. I have breakfast on one of my favorite terraces, one that gives me a particularly large panoramic view. On the hill above the rock formation in the sea at Scopello, where an ancient fisherman's house stands, I overlook the whole large bay of the sea. To the left of the west, the National Park dello Zingaro, to the coastal foothills of Palermo in the east. Apparently, due to the geographic peculiarities of the different mountain ranges and their valleys that stretch from the coast inland, with this manageable space, there are different weather zones clearly delineated from each other and side by side. This condition creates this closely spaced spectacle of different colors, light conditions, and weather atmospheres. Towards the west, the coast shines in this calm light, light blue the sky. Only behind the mountains, a few darker clouds seem to be stuck. This weather zone extends to me and wraps me in this described pleasant atmosphere. Revealing itself to my right, towards the east, a thick blanket of clouds is formed, shielding the sun, which is still very strong at this time of year for me. At the very eastern end of the horizon, I see the various mountain ranges immersed in a diffuse grey, silhouetted against each other, as one knows from traditional Japanese painting. The whole structure of the landscape looks like an artificially created assemblage or a Baroque theatre set. The Italian Baroque theatre technique has created an illusionary space with simple means, namely these two-dimensional painted landscape panels, which sometimes seems more natural than this silhouette-like landscape in the background. As if that were not enough theatre, the following play of light takes place before my eyes, using the surface of the sea as a reinforcing canvas. As I reach my vantage point, three clearly delineated silvery cones of light pierce the dark surface of the water as if created by three huge ceiling spotlights. Spellbound, I gaze at this strange, now almost futuristic looking formation and enter into close contact with what is offered to me. What language does nature speak? Is it trying to tell me something? I think of the interaction of the nature surrounding me, which sensations and thoughts it stimulates in me, knowing well that I carry my conditio humana into my experience of nature. It is clear that man, influenced by culture and experience, projects different things into nature at all times. But this does not mean that all perception must be limited to this projection, and a sent and received message is not equally possible. Just as artists describe again and again their inspirations as received from outside or above, just as inspirations, also the nature surrounding me can want to tell me something. I'm a part of this nature, even if the modern man in his hubris has decoupled himself to a good part from it. Given the impression of these three cones of light, I now think of my project, my writing, my book. Yes, there are three basic thematic pillars on which I would like to build my book. Starting from these, I would like to shift the focus and illuminate other areas and associated peripheral areas. Further, I look spellbound on the play of the light, and organically the light cones move and shift now. A column closes, goes up again somewhere else. They unite strange silvery signs on the water surface. The chaser lights in the theatre create a similar effect, directing the viewer's attention, focusing and obscuring the surrounding. But the diameter of the cone usually remains the same. Not here. In the southern Italian Baroque natural theatre in the Gulf of Castellammare. Here, the cone and the shape of the section now continually change into an organic play of light, a silvery dance in slow motion. In retrospect, it now makes the moment all the more astonishing when, for some time, three neatly separated circular cones of the light remained frozen on the surface of the water. The sight stimulates my thoughts. I think of these three basic pillars and how they are interrelated, interpenetrate each other, shine a perhaps completely different, unexpected light on other areas. I can't number these three pillars at first, second and third, as if one would logically arise from the second and inevitably lead into the third. There are various connecting lines and layers, and the one that has developed over time in history is only one of them. I myself carry these three pillars as thematic complexes in a three-dimensional form, as organic sculptures connected to life inside me. As soon as I ascribe a certain name to these columns, I already create a setting which necessarily brings a certain shortening and narrowing with it. But this is the basic condition of human language. Human language functions mostly as an abstract aid, as a thin basic framework that enables us to transfer ideas from one human being to another. No more and no less. Perhaps also out of this deficit, other forms of communication and expression arose in parallel in the history of mankind, which accompany, supplement, extend, transcend, or completely abandon spoken language and penetrate into a dimension that cannot be expressed. Body language, painting, sculpture, dance, ritual, music, and a lyrical art language of the poet and the language artist peeled out of the stringent rational logic. Whereby it is completely unclear in which order, or rather parallel, the different artistic forms of expression and languages may have emerged. What is clear is that all societies that somehow form and understand themselves as a culture always develop and cultivate all these different forms of communication, self-expression, and art. If an imbalance arises, such as a move away from the physical, emotional to a strongly rationally emphasized intellectual, this is not a good sign and possibly heralds a cultural decline. We are sentient human beings with emotional impulses and needs for expression on different levels. But of course, we are also thinking, reflective beings who look at our environment and existence and try to bring them into a coherent context. The one conditions the other. A haptic emotional experience of the world, and that the body moves and rubs itself in the fields of tension of its environment, and a stepping back attitude with distance, which reflects and verbalizes and orders the impressions. In my book, I try to keep these two levels in balance, the reflective, rational, and the artistic, intuitive, including all sensory perceptions. As a medium of communication, I have chosen the printed language. I try to make a virtue out of the necessity of the limitation of language by inviting you, dear reader, to fill the blanks with your own imagination and worldview. In this way, I relinquish some of the precision and control over what is conveyed, and at the same time I hope that you will appropriate the content, shape it, think about it further, take it in hand and knead it, develop it further, and you will find your own conclusions, solutions, and courses of action. Because I wish that you change your life. I wish that I and we change our life and find a different togetherness. Above all, I wish that we develop relationships and power relations in our everyday professional life that are free of exploitation, that we find ourselves on an equal footing, that we are given esteem, respect, trust, and that we pull together in the same direction. I know that is a high demand and the height of the fall is large. If I write a book that is boring to read, I have failed. If I write an entertaining, inspiring book that sells well and readers put it down elatedly after reading it and stop thinking about it, I've failed as well. I want my collective book project to cause you, me, us to change our lives. Of all the books you've read, how many books can you say that about? Namely, that it has had a fundamental, lasting impact on your life and how you live your life. With this claim, failure seems almost inevitable. But if I didn't even want to try this, I would have failed in advance. Why? Because historically we have reached a crossroads. We are all groping in the dark and don't know what to do. But we know with increasing explosiveness and clarity every day that things cannot go on like this. There is no alternative to a radical alternative. We will have to change our lives anyway. If we miss the window of time and the opportunity to actively shape this change, it will come upon us uncontrollably and be forced upon us in some probably not very pleasant way. In light of this reality, I think my claim no longer seems megalomaniacal, but downright rational, consequential, and necessary. Moreover, I intend to expand the traditional format of the book so that, with the help of an ongoing exchange through certain online platforms, I will be able to form a community of thought with my readers and continuously maintain this connection and relationship. I will now try to outline the three pillars, the three cones of light, with a few keywords in order to set the basic themes and to mark out the playing field in a broad way. Large scale because I'm trying to integrate empty spaces, to leave a lot of room for your own thoughts, your participation and your contributions, which are then to be integrated collectively into the mosaic. As with a large mosaic, where many stones can be missing, with a little distance, a coherent picture emerges. But rather as a loose weave of ideas, thoughts and feelings, and just not in all details through declined, precise image that forces the viewer into a very specific point of view. One of the three pillars could be called the status quo. Today, where have we arrived historically in the 20th or the 21st century, in a modern technological, interdependent and globalized world? Our personal, social and national relationships are strongly influenced by our economic system and the resulting dependencies. These dependencies in turn result in large part from a power structure that at best is based on the results of cutthroat competition, but is often created and stabilized by brute force, especially at the margins of empire, in the poorer countries whose raw materials we exploit. This system, this world economic order, is not a law of nature, but a system created by human beings, which has grown historically for certain circumstances and reasons. We humans can also in turn change the system, break through it, strip it away and oppose it with a completely different way of doing things. And so I come to another pillar, namely utopia, a collective utopia, in order to come a significant step closer to heaven on earth. This set of themes is about the possibilities and tangible alternatives of how we can radically and fundamentally transcend our system in the now, immediately, today, in our immediate environment, in our communal arrangements of how we live together, work together, and manage together. It's about developing and implementing small revolutionary cells in our world today as a grassroots movement for real and lasting change. But for that, we must first understand the status quo as well as somehow possible, so as not to prolong it unnoticed and with half-hearted refrains, something that could be implied by the buzzword greenwashing. The word collective is crucial because I want to integrate your perspectives, ideas, and experiences to build a shared, strongly interwoven body of ideas and experiences. In the second preface to the book, I described the rules of the game and technical tools for how I try to create as direct and dense a meshing as possible between my ideas and those of my readers. And the third pillar, which in turn connects and underpins the other two, is the realm of the spiritual. The status quo, our current economic system, is the disease we suffer from today on the whole planet, but not the cause. The cause is a deep spiritual crisis of modern man. Man has lost God, and as a result has chosen money, mammon, as his God. But this mammon is voracious. It wants more and more. It wants to fill the inner emptiness of its degraded soul with all the wealth, gold, fame, and power outside, ruling and commanding in this world. However, the psychological and spiritual impossibility of this undertaking fuels all the more the voracious greed, the boundless exploitation, the compulsion for growth, up to self-destruction. We can only heal this disease if we go to the root, to the deeper cause. This also means that we must integrate this spiritual healing of the disease into our utopia if we want to make real, profound, and healing change possible. It is not enough to fight the worst symptoms of this disease and at the same time ignore the cause and the addictive dynamics that have arisen from it. Therefore, any attempt to solve the problem within the evolved system coordinates is also doomed to failure. It's like trying to suggest to an alcoholic that instead of drinking a whole bottle of vodka, he should drink a few drops less of it every day. By the year 2050, he would be dry. Or even more absurd, and a very dangerous tendency today, we believe that vodka producers, that they themselves have now suddenly discovered their social responsibility after decades of ignorance, coincidentally at the same time as a broad social awakening of a problem awareness. They now claim that they would use all their profits and monetary power to set up clinics for alcoholics and look after their welfare. Of course, at the same time, the core business must of course continue. Who else would pay for the clinics? It is completely absurd to hope that the powerful of the system that made them great, to which they owe all their success, influence, and power, would transcend and dissolve the system itself. In doing so, they would be marginalizing themselves deliberately. And that is exactly what would have to happen for real change. Only in this way could we actually solve the systemic problem, which is precisely that it accumulates money and power at the top and among individuals and the few to detriment of the great majority. You can already see how these three areas, the status quo, a real tangible collective utopia, and the spiritual conditions of such a transformation are inextricably linked. These three cones of light change, shift, and interpenetrate. I reflect on the fact that the form and the content must be congruent. The end and the means must match. If I want to contribute to a collective healing, I cannot simultaneously strike a harsh accusatory tone. What doctor can cure an addict by showering him with accusations? On the contrary, the accusatory tone is a trap, namely regardless of whether I would be 100% right or not. In this way, I exalt myself, elevate myself, and thereby humiliate others. Once apart from the fact that it is psychologically impossible from this haughty and arrogant point of view to influence a counterpart positively. There is also the danger that I use the evil in the world to construct and cultivate my own moral identity and a sense of superiority, precisely in distinction from evil. But then again, it is mainly about myself. So I remain just as again arrested in an ego-centered reality, which constitutes one of the basic evils of our sick, egomaniacal world today. I will not be able to build bridges in this irreconcilable demarcation that drives a wedge between people. Instead of opening a space for healing, I become a divider and thereby a tool of evil. As I ponder this and the biblical words run through my mind, you can only serve one master. The previously separate cones of light unite into one, creating a glistening light on the surface of the water that blinds me. Dazzled in the true sense of the word, I say to myself, the message has arrived. There can be only one God. At that exact moment, the cloud cover suddenly closes and the light show is over. It is unbelievable. And if you now think that I made this up as a literary, metaphorical, stylistic device, you overestimate my talent as a writer. It happened just like that. A coincidence? Perhaps I will fail in my endeavor. Maybe my ideas and efforts will fizzle out into nothingness. Maybe no one will be interested in this attempt at a new beginning. Maybe this project will slip away from me and sink into the primordial ground of lost ideas. Maybe my revolution will be one that takes place solely in my own head and is only carried out in the limited space of my own four walls. Perhaps I will fail. But I'm not afraid of failure, not anymore. I have failed too often in my life. How many efforts have been in vain? How many ideas have not worked, have been stranded or not even attempted? How much searching and passion have I bundled and burned again, running after some idea, some ideal? How many people have I had to deal with in the most diverse places, in different countries and continents? In how many musical groups have I played and worked, gone from one to the next, and always at a certain point closed the door behind me and left? A long chain of abandonments, of failures, yes, I'm practiced in it. I have become an art virtuoso of failure. One idea is born, develops, fails, is buried and forgotten. Then comes a new one and the cycle repeats itself. All in vain? Perhaps. At the same time, however, I have become the personality I have become, solid in the face of change, with both feet firmly on shaky ground, because I have been able to gather all these experiences, hopes and disappointments. I carry this rich treasure of unbelievably heterogeneous experiences with very different people, groups of people, institutions, organizational forms and structures. A mixture of scents and spices from all over the world. The only constant in my life is change. But the only constant, a success, if you will, is a relationship with my wife, with whom I have been involved since I was 17. But success is probably not the right word, because the quality and constancy of my marriage marriage consists rather in the persistent embrace and integration of a daily failure that my wife and I, that we confront again and again and again. The basic tension of our marriage is one of conflict, two different worlds that often seem to come from different universes, magnetically attracting and repulsing each other at the same time, challenging each other, sometimes wearing each other out, and yet it is precisely in their fundamentally different perspectives that we mutually enrich each other. The willingness to live this relationship, to expose and surrender to this dynamic, is probably a mixture of pathology and great love. Everything is void and everything flows. Our existence is like the blink of an eye in the course of time, and yet at the same time, a single moment of love can break through the continuum, the deliquescence of the time stream, suspend the laws of time, and enter eternity as if coagulated into a pearl. What does failure mean? If I have given myself away, if I have succeeded, at least for a moment, for an instant, in letting love flow from my heart, in bundling and condensing it, in bringing it into harmony with the divine and the infinite, perhaps in touching another person, I have won. I have at least won something. And something is not nothing, and at the same time can be a seed for what is to come. So I'm going to take a look if somebody is stating a question. It might be a bit difficult to follow in this spoken manner. The text is quite complex, and maybe it's easier to read and be able to repeat some certain sentences to think about them. Okay, I think there's nobody writing anything, so that's it for now, and I'll see you in a week's time.